I'm gonna agree with that. We are a small fish in the pond here, in Asia. But there are some flashpoints here. It will behoove United States to pay attention to those at least. Maybe we'll just talk about the South China Sea. I know that China has turned 7 reefs into artificial islands. On 3 of them, they're hosting airstrips to project their power. Ngurah, I think Indonesia clashes with China over fishing rights in the Natuna Islands, but you guys are not in a direct territorial dispute with China. How do you think?
No.
Yeah, but there are other claimants, right? There's Brunei, Malaysia, Taiwan, Philippines, and Vietnam. How do you think US should handle the South China Sea dispute? Do you think ASEAN could step up to do more?
Well, of course, there are, we are now trying to invite for the in-person meeting of the negotiation of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. Of course, there are a lot of, people need to be convinced that this is really something that will create a conducive environment. For us, this is a matter of principles that international law should prevail, UNCLOS should prevail, and that was the reason why then, every encroachment in our even ZEE, we will take actions. But then when we took actions, we do it in a way that it really enforcing the law, but at the same time we are not going to create an embarrassment on the big elephant. So we settle it, but we send a very clear signals. We send a very clear message that we cannot accept that. And I think there was already a plan for the ASEAN-US joint military exercises following what the Chinese has already been doing before. So, we have shared principle with the US on this issue. Freedom of navigation, we support that. We are voicing that. And of course, as so far, concerning our territorial integrity, territorial waters or even ZEE, we are also very firm. And we are also inviting the US companies, passive, to also be present, investing in Natuna. This is a message. We had a discussion with the IDFC, but nothing is happening yet.
And Bilahari, I know now we have one other flashpoint out in Myanmar. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I know you have very interesting viewpoints on what's going on in Myanmar and how US should handle it, or rather how ASEAN could handle it. I know you have cautioned many times not to criticize a cow for being an imperfect horse, referring to those things that ASEAN was not designed to do in the first place. But I'm just wondering, is there any way we could do an upgrade on this cow and play a bigger role in the disputes in the region?
Oh. Is anybody in ASEAN, outside ASEAN, prepared to put together a force, intervene in Myanmar, set the Tatmadaw aside, put back Aung San Suu Kyi in power, and stay there to protect her maybe for decades? Nobody, right? So let's start from a bitterly realistic baseline. Nobody has much influence over the Tatmadaw. Right? So there is no solution that the Tatmadaw, if the Tatmadaw doesn't agree to a solution. What we can do is to urge them, and we have done, that's the import of the 5-point consensus that the Senior General Min Aung Hlaing did not object to, and therefore could be said to be part of. It is to urge them to do what they said they would do. That after some time, when they feel confident enough to have some form of election, to have a return to some form of civilian government, and in the meantime, to lower the threshold of violence against the protesters, in the meantime, to release political prisoners if they can, and so on. That's all that you can do. And I see that the external powers, the US, Canada, Europe are much more realistic this time because of the bitter experience after 1988, when there was 20 years of very unfocused sanctions, shall we say, 20 years of shouting and screaming, and it moves the Tatmadaw not 1 millimeter. Now, the sanctions are targeted at Tatmadaw individuals, Tatmadaw related entities, and so on, and I think that's fine. But you need to let ASEAN keep on talking to the Tatmadaw, keep on talking to the people, the authorities in Yangon, and try to persuade them to do what they said that they were going to do anyway. And that's all anybody can realistically do. And I think that is much better understood now, both in the US and in Europe.
Thank you very much. Now we have 20 minutes to close. Steve, I'm gonna
actually wait. I want to just go to just on Myanmar. I mean, look, 2 months ago, ASEAN came up with a consensus that said, point one, there will be an immediate cessation of violence. That was 2 months ago. The violence has gotten worse in the last 2 months. And so how is ASEAN going to have credibility in terms of foreign policy if it's going to have statements and it's going to issue a consensus that isn't going to be followed? And this is going to be very difficult for the US, the EU, to sit down with the 10 members of ASEAN if one of those is perpetrating the murders of its own civilians and is teetering on the brink of civil war now. And so
what do you expect us to do, Steve? Should we intervene? Shall we have an ASEAN expeditionary force?
Should Myanmar still be a member? Should Myanmar still be a member of ASEAN? Should they be?
Well, I was rather the other day. I should tell you all something that rather amused me. The other day, I was on a webinar with some Cambodians, and a very prominent Cambodian ex-ambassador actually said, "Oh, maybe we should suspend Myanmar." Well done, But where do we stop? We should suspend members that do not behave well, right? And then he started having second thoughts about what he just said. And he retreated. No, I understand you, Steve, and to some degree, I agree with you. But this is the best that you can realistically do. And I think there is a better understanding of this in the West this time rather than the last time. The level of violence, by the way, has two parts to it. There are people, not any government that I know of, thank God, who are urging armed resistance. That is a recipe for disaster, right? For everybody,
exactly.
Right? So,
yeah.
I think that's very irresponsible.
Yeah.
So we need to be patient. We need to compose ourselves in bitter patience, because I don't say it's easy. It's very difficult. It's bitter. But we just have to be patient. We have to keep the confidence of the authorities in Naypyidaw, of the Tatmadaw. Because if they lose confidence, even a teeny modicum of influence that we have or don't have will disappear.
Bila,
right?
Is it a strategic patient like what the US also did in the Korean Peninsula as well?
Well, I wouldn't call it strategic per se to Asia. You know why? You know my views on this. Again,
well, the issue of on the issue of Myanmar, I think there was a discussion like before when we drafted the ASEAN Charter. There was a discussion. What is the sanction that we need to do to
there
those
was a
countries
suggestion that we should have something to suspend people.
Yes,
By Malaysia had a suggestion.
There are suggestions that we need to not only suspend, kick out, and then and that particular country is saying that then include also withdrawal. So before you sack us, I will resign. I will resign. Then when
I quit before I'm fired.
When this country resign, then we know that this is going to be fallen into a situation where we will not be able to manage. Number two, certainly, of course, the most important thing is that, Steve, to have a consensus for all leaders to come to Jakarta in the middle of the pandemic. And then they call it ASEAN Leaders Meeting, not ASEAN Summit, because it's a very clear, recognition in saying that we don't recognize you. But this is among the ASEAN leaders, and we would like to send a message directly to the face in saying that what we are going to do is for your own sake, is for your own people's sake. So we are not going to follow, sanction or something like that. I remember one very important instances, Bilahari, if you remember, when the Cyclone Nargis, the Cyclone Nargis, you remember that? The Cyclone Nargis, the Cyclone Nargis, so the Cyclone Nargis hit, and then they said that, everything has already been under control, while the satellite imagery are showing us dead bodies are not collected yet. And then at that time, the same time, they are organizing election. They said that election was done very well, So I remember the special foreign ministers meeting in Singapore. when we are saying that we need to do something, because you cannot hide what is happening. We know what is happening. And then they said that no. I mean, again, the issue of non-intervention principles. I did also, to talk about this later on in the next session, perhaps, Lily. Non-intervention, this is really, the non-intervention principle has already been recalibrated in the practice of ASEAN. It was not like what we knew when it was established at the beginning. So on the issue of Cyclone Nargis, Foreign Minister Hassan Wirayuda gave the Foreign Minister of Myanmar from the military, junta, options, because we know at that time the international community are talking about humanitarian intervention, responsibility to protect. They have already been preparing all of those assets. What they need to do, they will not ask permission from the Myanmar government, but they would like to see whether ASEAN can, can facilitate for the humanitarian assistance. Then finally, they agree, they concede. So it needs some time, but I believe it should not be 20 years. And the situation now is even more complicated with the social media. I mean, the pro government has already been criticizing also us for what we are doing. We are trying to really solve the problem, and the General Assembly resolution, the last one. I mean, even Myanmar PR is voting for yes.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. We have just 15 minutes to close. I want to take questions from the audience. They've been so patient.